Welcome to the Self-Control Show, a podcast for men. If you get defensive, shut down, or find yourself going 0 to 100, you're in the right place. Most men were never taught how to regulate their emotions. And this show is about changing that. It's not therapy, and it's not fluff. It's training. I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Let's get to work. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Got an awesome topic today. And talking about common ways guys show up in their marriage and in their life. I think last week I talked about, the performer and achieving. This week, what I've got in this we'll call it like a little mini series, why being a nice guy or a good guy isn't working. And the response of being the nice guy or the pleaser, where that comes from, what happens in those moments and why it formed, and how that shows up in your marriage and your life, the cost of that, and what it should look like and how to go about changing it. Really, what this looks like practically, if this is you, if you will, you might say to yourself, I don't raise my voice, right? I avoid the conflict. You like to keep things smooth. Maybe you say things like whatever you want, right? There's a level of passivity that comes with going with the flow. You choose that path over actually saying what you really feel, right? And you've kind of built this identity of being the calm, easygoing guy, right? And you see that as the steady one. But the thing is your wife actually is feeling disconnected. And it might seem like you're doing everything right and it's still not landing for her. And this is why it's not working. This is why it's actually breaking that connection. And where it comes from is what we're going to be talking about. So when you think about people pleasing and being the nice guy, it starts with back in our childhood, right? And if you haven't made this connection, think about, if you had a mom or a dad that you were more or less in charge of comforting, right? Your parents had a hard time, so they looked to you to step up emotionally. And this could be, your mom and your dad didn't get along and your mom kind of always used you as her little guy, right? And compared you to him and just oh yeah, dad disappointed, but you're here and you're just the best, right? You're not like him. Or you got rewarded for being easygoing, right? And maybe not needing anything was a point of pride, right? Whether it be, your friends were extra, difficult, or maybe you just had a brother or sister that were extra difficult if they're older or younger. And you saw kind of what that acting up got them because maybe they were punished. You're oof, don't want that. That looks terrible. I'm just going to do the best I can to do everything right. Right. And so that's where you kind of learn that, hey, if I'm good and agreeable, then mom and dad don't get upset with me, right? It could also be that you were punished for having boundaries or you got criticized for being too much. When you did ask for things, your parents are you're so needy. Who do you think you are? Sort of mentality. You weren't allowed to kind of learn to set your own boundaries, right? That connection just came solely from being agreeable. So you start to associate your truth is going to be rejected, right? And if you're honest, well, that's dangerous because I'm too much, right? And my parents don't accept me. That's how you adapt to keep the peace because what we're ultimately afraid of is rejection. And then there's this thing called enmeshment where it's kind of hey, I'm only okay if you're okay. And if you're not okay, then I'm not okay. Right. And that's when we get into the whole hey, fixing the problem, right? Your wife is in distress and she comes to you with a problem. And what's the first thing that you want to do? You want to fix it. You want to make it better. You want to soothe. And that's a learned thing because for most women, they'll say, hey, I just want you to listen. I don't want you to solve my problems. Just venting. But there's an activation in that where we start to feel this obligation to fix it, which is interesting, right? Because there's this sense and this feeling internally That it's like, hey, if she's not okay, then I'm not okay. And when you really think about that, think about like where you got that, where that came from. Because like in a lot of ways, probably you wouldn't expect that from anybody else because, you can solve your own problems. Sometimes it's even annoying to hear somebody else tell you what you like they think you should do. When in a lot of ways, you know what you should do, right? And the reason why that happens, again, going back to all the things that I talked about, is that you learn that connection is earned through compliance, and connection is like, hey, you're okay, then I'm okay, right? And the problem with that is, and the problem with people pleasing and the problem with being the nice guy is, on one hand, you never really learn what you need, right? You never are allowed to kind of explore like truly what you like and what you don't like, right? And when you make this, some people would call it a covert contract because you don't really make the agreement out loud. You kind of just say, hey, if I take care of your needs, you'll take care of my needs. And I'm just going to try to always make things good for you. So you do that same for me. But we don't actually like talk about that out loud, right? We're just told, I need to make you happy, happy wife, happy life. And then like everything's good. But what happens for most guys is they start resenting their wife, right? In a quiet, slow way, right? And sometimes even noble. Like there's a bit of nobility, right? That happens along with the resentment because you think you're doing such a good job, right? But this can turn into resentment, which can shut you and her down sexually, right? You withdraw emotionally because you have a feeling of rejection because like your needs aren't getting met. And maybe when you go ask for them to be met, you do it in a passive aggressive way because you never learned how to ask for them. Or maybe you've just been in a relationship for so long, you start resenting her and you don't even know why. The thing is that's because you never got an opportunity to really learn what it is that you needed because you were never allowed to bring your truth into a relationship. And most guys don't wake up to that until they're 30, 40, 50 years old. Ultimately, when you don't learn that and there's a lot of resentment there, right? And you're not able to like bring your truth to the relationship, she feels like she's carrying all the emotional weight, even though you feel like you're doing all this stuff to make her happy. And so you guys both have resentment. And so this thing in which you learned that you didn't choose to do solved a problem for you in a period of your life. It's actually the thing that's causing you to have this like turbulence in your marriage or this resentment or contempt in your marriage, right? Or even like not really being happy. Sometimes it can even show up as like midlife crisis. You don't even know who you really are because you've spent so much time trying to be good and agreeable that you just basically self-abandon in a lot of ways, right? And it's really confusing to hear this from your wife, like to hear that she feels like she's doing it all on her own, that she's not happy. And because it's like we're trying so hard to get it right and to fix things. But that's just not what it looks like, right? She doesn't want the nice guy. She wants a regulated guy, meaning you can make sure your emotions are regulated. So when she gets dysregulated, it doesn't take you out. So you don't jump to this, like, I need to fix it or I need to please to make sure everything's smooth, right? She just needs you to be real. She needs you to be steady. She needs you to see conflict as not a problem, right? And it's not like this disconnection that needs to be solved right away. It's something that can be worked through, right? But if we were never shown that, right? And disconnection was something that was like, oh shit, when we were growing up, we're going to take that into here. If we were never able to be our full honest self and be true to ourselves and be able to set boundaries and be able to have presence, right? Well, then we're not going to be able to show up that way in our marriages. And she's never going to be able to relax knowing that you're being honest, knowing that you're in your truth, knowing that it's okay for you to set boundaries. It's okay for her to be upset, right? That doesn't take you out. It doesn't mean that that like you doing a good job is not her never being upset, right? Because that's where the trap is is you're so avoidant of conflict that you try to like get everything right and to please and to fix that she just never gets upset. But that's just like not possible. Everybody gets upset. But when you see that as like whether or not you're doing a good job, because you've connected that back to basically the old way of doing things, and that pattern and that cycle, well, then like you're going to resent her for being upset. And like, what does she really have to complain about? Look at all the stuff that I'm doing. Ultimately, what you have to do is ask yourself the question, like, how do you want your kids looking at you as a man, right? Do you want your son to think that being a man means being silent, compliant, disconnected from yourself? Do you want your daughter to see, how men are just like a yes man, like being walked all over? And not because like she's bad, right? Your wife's bad, but it's because like you never learned how to stand up for yourself and say what you really meant, have that self-respect. You're not failing because like you're a bad guy, right? The thing is like you're failing and this process is here is because you've traded your truth for safety, basically, for connection. But you can never have real connection and real intimacy without taking responsibility for your own feelings. That's where it starts. You have to be responsible for your own feelings, right? You can't keep the peace all the time, right? There's got to be conflict. Otherwise, it builds and builds and builds and comes out in not healthy ways, which, crazy enough, recreates the very thing that you're worried about, disconnection, right? We do all these things for the sake of connection and closeness. But in reality, what happens is we self-actualize our biggest fear of disconnection, not being able to make our wife happy, right? To be in that healthy, happy marriage and relationship. So if you want to stop being a people pleaser and start leading in a grounded presence, it starts with regulation, starts with emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, guys. And if you don't know what that is, you're not going to learn it in a book or learn it from listening to podcasts. You got to actually dig in and learn the tools and learn the skills and figure out why you are the way that you are and how to rewire that. And that's exactly why I offer complimentary calls about this stuff. So if you want to book a call, let's hop on, get to the bottom of this stuff so that you can start making actual real behavioral change moving forward. Thanks for listening, you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.